Peter Thomas, Fornatale, back with you on this special video for our friends at First Racing, covering the key Kentucky Derby prep race action that we have coming down the pike this weekend. First Saturday, loaded, stakes-laden cards at both Gulfstream Park and Santa Anita. And to talk about the races that seem to capture the public's imagination more than all the rest, the three-year-old prep races, we bring in the duo from NBC Sports. They are sitting in the wrong order according to their graphic. I swear they do that on purpose just to taunt me. But we've got the Hall of Famer.
Wait. Here we go.
Jerry Bailey.
Okay.
And the legendary analyst, Randy Moss. Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely with you two, how are you doing today?
Are we live or are we taping? Because if we're
live,
we're
man.
we're not sure we can handle live. I don't know.
We can always edit for the replay if we need to, but I think the professionals that you guys are, we can just about get away with getting this one in off the goalpost.
All right. Let's do it.
So you've got one microphone between you. So I guess I'll ask long questions and I'll cue who the question is going to be for. Oh, you've got two microphones now. Even better. Jerry, what are the vibes like? What are the vibes like down there at Gulfstream Park ahead of this big weekend of racing?
Well, we don't know.
They got to be great. It's 78 and sunny, but we're up in Connecticut and it's 50 and blowing.
These are behind us. This is the NBC studio in Stamford, Connecticut, which is gigantic. It's where they do everything out of here. It used to be 30 Rock in Manhattan, and sports got to be too big. So now they have their own facility here, and that's where we do the lion's share of the telecast.
So of course, Pete, I live 20 minutes from Gulfstream, and I have to fly to Connecticut to do those races.
Very convenient. Very convenient that. Well, I did talk to our man on the ground there, Brian Nadeau. Sounds like that the excitement is building. This is a terrific card. They have lots of great wagering opportunities. Personally, I'm very excited about a couple of the retail-only wagers they have cooking, including the Pick 5 that starts in race number 3, as well as the coast-to-coast bet that's connecting these races from Gulfstream and Santa Anita, though doesn't have the San Felipe as part of it. But I'm very excited. We got coverage all over the In the Money Media Network of that. But I want to get down into what people really want to hear about with you two. And Randy, we'll start with you and your high-level thoughts on this year's Fountain of Youth Stakes. Do you expect we'll look back and identify this as one of the key preps for this year's Kentucky Derby?
I don't know how many high-level thoughts I actually have, Pete, but yes, I do think that this is so far, it's only going to be a 7-horse field, right? Because we're going to have a scratch. But, so it's not as big a field like as we saw in the Rebel Stakes at Oaklawn last week. But as far as the depth of the field that include leading contenders for the Kentucky Derby, then I think this is the deepest prep race that we've seen so far, because you've got, at least 3 and maybe more, really, really solid 3-year-olds right here.
I think we should start off with Sovereignty for Bill Mott. This is a horse I've been very interested in. When I made a Derby top 10 list towards the end of last year, his name was on top of it, and I feel obligated to make him my selection in this race. But even as I do it, I look and I say, wait, this is Bill Mott. This is a means to an end. How's this race going to set up for him? Jerry, how much of the preparation for Sovereignty do you feel like is geared towards making him able to win this race today? And how much of the plan for Sovereignty is entirely geared toward what's going to be happening 2 starts from now?
Well, as an overall picture, I think this is a means to an end. But if you pay attention to Bill Mott at all, you'll quickly figure out that his horses run as good as they ever will off the bench. He has them ready. Now, the dynamics of the race set up for him, there's plenty of speed in here. There's an overabundance of speed, actually. So the pace should be there for him. But he's a closer, and this is a 1.16 with a short wire and a very short stretch run to that wire. The shortest in America, right, Randy?
Even the regular finish line at the Gulfstream Park is 898 feet. It's the shortest of any major 1 mile or larger oval in America. And this is 690 feet. I mean, this is almost 2 football fields shorter than the Kentucky Derby. So whereas he'll be ready to win, Mott's biggest concern is that Yeah, he's in Florida, so he wants to run, he needs to run, and this is the race to run in. But the short stretch, Mott even believes, will probably be his undoing, but he'll be running late for sure.
All right, we're going to get to your specific tips on this race in a minute. Let's go through a couple other key runners in this field. Maybe it sets up better for a runner like number 6, River Thames. Todd Pletcher been a little bit conspicuously absent from a lot of the Derby top 10 lists we've seen around. That might change in a hurry on Saturday afternoon. Is River Thames a serious contender to you in this race, Randy?
I think he is. As a matter of fact, that's who I would. I think one of the 2 Todd Pletcher horses is probably going to wind up winning the race. Gate to Wire on the inside from post 1, the winner of the Swale. It's going to be a big price, probably bigger. It'll be 8-1. Who knows? Maybe even 10-1, depending on what kind of pace pressure he gets from Neo Equos on the outside. He might have a chance to go wire to wire. But River Thames, I don't like him going forward necessarily in the longer races, 1 1/8 Florida Derby, Kentucky Derby. I don't think he's bred to go that far. But short stretch, 1 1/16, if he gets the right kind of trip, I think he's the kind of horse that could beat Burnham Square and Sovereignty.
Burnham Square, the next name on my list to ask you about. So impressive the last day. And Ian Wilkes, a trainer, brings them along, incremental progress, and then they tend to get good and stay good. Had a little bit of a setup in the Holy Bull, you could argue, might or might not get the setup today. As Jerry pointed out, looks like there's a lot of pace on paper, but the short stretch finish line. Of course, he dealt with it last time. What are we expecting, Jerry, out of Burnham Square this time around?
I think that the same thing. I think, and as a matter of fact, I think it's a little easier because last time he was on the far outside post, if you remember, so he immediately took back to get over to the rail for that short run into the first turn. He won't have quite as much of that to deal with because they are actually going to start the race 85 feet farther back to give the horses a better run up into that first turn. So that works to his advantage. And if you'll remember last time, he started his move up the rail down the backside, closing the gap a little bit. And by the middle of the turn, he was well within striking distance. He just had to wait for a spot to run. I think he'll do the same thing this time. I think he will be in front of Sovereignty, I think, by the time they hit the top of the stretch with only 4 or 5 lengths to make up. And I think he will probably make them up. The question is can he run fast enough to beat these quality horses like River Thames, like Getaway, Gate to Wire? I don't know if he's fast enough. He is improving, but he's going to, again, have to take another step forward.
What's interesting, Pete, and this is something that handicappers almost never take into consideration, and it's only going to be a minor advantage, right? But the fact that Gulfstream is changing the run-up for this race, and they're adding 85 feet to the run-up, okay? That's just, it'll still be timed at 1 1/16, but obviously the race begins when the horses leave the gate. So it's actually going to be an 85-foot farther race than it was in the Holy Bull. So for
a little over 28 yards.
Yeah.
Right. That's not insignificant. This is down the rabbit hole, but we have a sophisticated audience here. How does that affect things for you, Randy, as a figure maker and as someone who's very figure focused in the way you study the form? What kind of adjustments do you make based on a run-up like that?
Well, I mean, fortunately, I don't do Gulfstream Park speed figures. We've got a guy named Bob Weir that does them because it's chaos trying to make numbers at Gulfstream because now you have fewer dirt races than you have turf and Tapeta races. And so you got to make a variant based on sometimes 2 races a day on dirt, maybe 3. And if you have a couple of races with first-time starters, you have it's crazy. When they lengthen the run-up, Pete, it means that the final time is going to be a little bit faster. How much faster, we're not exactly sure. So we're going to be like making these dirt figures for these races at 1 1/16 and 1 1/8 on sort of a experimental basis, I guess, until we get enough data to where we can feel confident in making an ironclad adjustment.
The first quarter will definitely show up faster on the board.
Right. Just thinking about it logically, the run up is kind of a literal thing. The time it takes to go from 0 to speed, and that's already being accounted for. It's definitely another interesting wrinkle in what's already a fascinating puzzle of trying to figure out who's going to win a horse race. And we'll get more into that at another point, but let's get back into the specifics of this race. Jerry, you mentioned about the speed scenario. River Thames obviously will be part of it. We talked a little bit about Neo Equus, who's going to be part of it. Do you imagine Keep It Easy stretching out from sprint distances will be another runner being part of that pace, or is there another runner you think could get involved here early?
No, it would be Gate to Wire on the inside, River Thames, and Neo Equus. Now, can River Thames ease back and let the two horses on the inside and outside go on? I don't know. I don't know that he's capable of doing that. That's another new wrinkle that will be folded in for him, having run around one turn twice. But I do think Keep It Easy will tuck in behind the 3 speed horses at some point into that first turn and sit in the catbird seat. And I don't know if he too can take the big jump from a sprint race into a mile on the 16th race. They've all got to improve. To me, this was the most confusing 2 races of the spring for me, because you either have horses that are super talented and you know about it, that don't have any points. You have horses that are talented enough and have some points. Can they take the step forward? And then you have horses that probably can win, but going forward, like River Thames and Gate to Wire, can't go a mile and a quarter. So you might like him today, but not like him for the Kentucky Derby.
In a certain respect, Pete, one of the keys to the way this race is going to be run, the Fountain of Youth, is going to be Neo Equus, and how much speed they want him to show. You got Irad in the saddle, and Irad, there's arguably nobody better in the sport. Maybe Flavian is as good at figuring out things like this and strategizing beforehand exactly what to do. But if they ease Neo Equus back a little bit and don't go with him early, then you've got a scenario with Gate to Wire probably on the lead, River Thames stalking him. They're stablemates. River Thames is not going to go up and pressure him too much early.
Well, he has distance limitations maybe himself too, so he doesn't want to get crazy early.
And they could go 1-2 all the way around there in one order or the other.
I'm maybe tipping my hand here about who I think the interesting long shot is, but Keep It Easy, at least looking at these bloodlines, to me seems to be one who could maybe even move forward with the added ground. Do you think that's fair to say, Jerry?
Yeah, definitely. If you watch his last race, granted it was last fall at Churchill Downs, the last 1/8 of a mile as he left the field was super impressive. I was really impressed with the way he finished. Again, that's allowance horses. He's got to take the next step forward and negotiate 2 turns. But yes, I think the longer, the better for him.
We like Dale Romans too, so it's nice to see him back in the mix with a good horse.
I've said this line on the shows before, and I'm sure I'll say it again before it's all said and done. The Triple Crown Trail is more fun with Dale Romans on it. Time for me to put your feet to the fire in terms of an official selection or potential approach to this race. Who's it going to be for you officially now, Randy, in this year's Fountain of Youth?
Well, I'll take River Thames. Because in the Holy Bull, I don't think any of the front runners, any of the speed horses were good enough to capitalize on the short stretch. And so you had Burnham Square, and then you had Brad Cox's horse Tappan Street going 1-2 all the way down the lane. I think River Thames might be good enough to be that horse who can capitalize on it. You're not convinced about the distance.
I'm not. I mean, he's a logical pick. But since you took him, I'll take Burnham Square again. But he's going to have to run a little bit faster because he's not fast enough yet to beat River Thames. So he is going to have to improve. But that's what Ian Wilkes does. Like his predecessor, Carl Nasker, he brings them along. I actually would like Burnham Square better today than I will in the Florida Derby, because that would be 3 races at Gulfstream Park in a short amount of time. So I would like him actually better here.
We'll be back to get to talk about that one with all the new information we'll have at that time. Sovereignty, you guys are both sort of expecting and would be happy with a hard charging second or third. Is that fair, or are you more skeptical than that?
No, it's about right. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he won. It wouldn't surprise me if he was flying at the end and ran a solid third.
When you look at the street sense and how visually impressive he was, and then in hindsight you go back and look, and one of the horses he blew away, and there was Sandman. Makes him look even better.
Yep, that's a totally fair point. Before we move out west and get to the San Felipe, just want to put in a quick plug for the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Going to be able to be fortunate to have these guys back, hopefully a couple of times before the Kentucky Derby. And when we have Jerry and Randy on, a few things. We're going to tell you when the NBC broadcast is, and we're going to be YouTube exclusive. So that should be a lot of fun. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel for In the Money Media and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of our YouTube exclusive content. We will get to that NBC thing. I was prepping you there so we can have that ready for the end. But let's get out to the San Gabriel Mountains and this year's San Felipe. Only a field of 6 scheduled to go postward. We've got a couple horses that would be near the top of anybody's top 10 list for the Kentucky Derby, I would think, in Barnes and Journalism, potentially interesting up-and-comer in Rodriguez. But let's start with Barnes, this horse who clearly is very special to Bob Baffert, the one that broke his, it wasn't really a losing streak, was it? The first horse to give him a win under the Twin Spires since all of the drama, we'll put it that way, and then comes back and runs very well. But he's yet to have a single Derby point to his name. You'd think he'd be getting some in this San Felipe. Can he win the whole thing, Jerry?
Yeah, he's the best. He's the best 3-year-old Kentucky Derby potential with no points in America. I think we both had him top of our list for weeks now. He went to Churchill Downs and ran a distance that Bob Baffert didn't really want to run in, but that was the way the distance of the race, 5.5 furlongs. I don't think he got a particularly good ride in that race. He won, but Martine had him going and coming and stuck on the inside and then wheeled him out and was drifting out wide. To me, it was a miracle that he got up to win. And then he comes back in the San Vicente. It was completely dominating. Progression from 5.5 to 7 furlongs. I would think that he would handle the mile and 16th without a problem. I think his pedigree doesn't scream distance, but it's good enough to where I don't think it's a problem. And I think he's the most talented horse in the race.
A couple points I want to make about him. First of all, I think we've got the same sort of scenario here, sort of the Bob Baffert Stakes that we had in the Lewis, in that I think Rodriguez would have a better chance on the early lead than Stalking. But if you go back to the race in the Lewis, you had Citizen Bull, another Baffert horse, and a more highly regarded Baffert horse, really, the champion, drawn inside of Rodriguez. So Citizen Bull goes to the lead, and the strategy was to try to take Rodriguez back. And Rodriguez had a bit of an interesting trip and ran pretty well, but didn't win. Again here, you've got Barnes drawn inside of Rodriguez. And so I think what you're going to see is not Mellencamp, the other Baffert horse, but Barnes going to the lead, controlling the pace, trying to rate Rodriguez off of him. I don't think Journalism's going to go. So I think it's going to be another pretty good trip for a Bob Baffert horse. Now, I will say this about Barnes, and I think this is kind of important from a betting perspective. Okay, even though we both have Barnes on top of our Kentucky Derby list right now, I think it's pretty safe to say that right now what people think of Barnes has a lot to do with who trains him. It has more to do with who trains him and his purchase price as a yearling than it does with what we've actually seen on the racetrack from Barnes. So I think that's going to make his price a lot lower than maybe it would deserve to be, based on his 2 races so far.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, $3.2 million. That'll get your attention pretty much every time. And he's 2 for 2. And as you say, Baffert trains him. His numbers aren't as fast. His best number is not as fast as Rodriguez. Not even close, actually. But I think he goes right to the lead and keeps on going.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing about Rodriguez, and I don't disagree with what you said, but that he might be better on the lead. But Bob Baffert has said, if he can get Rodriguez to relax, then I think he will be a very good horse. But that means don't send him. Let him relax, and I think this is the perfect race for him.
Very interesting. Another thing about Barnes, of course, that is a known thing, but worth pointing out: special price, special name, with Jimmy Barnes being the man who's been the guy behind the guy for the 2 Baffert Triple Crown winners. I mean, this horse he's been seemingly sprinkled with gold dust from the beginning. One thing I'll also say about him, he is, and tell me if I'm correct about this, Jerry, but doesn't he shape in his races? Forget what it says on the pedigree page, but he shapes in his races like one who's going to potentially be considerably better going farther. True or false?
Barnes?
Yeah.
I'm not actually convinced of that yet.
I'm not either. Into Mischief.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't scream a mile and a quarter.
Not on the page. Not on the pedigree page. I just feel like as sharp as the 5.5 looked for him, and as well as he was going at the end of 7, if you didn't tell me who he was by, I would have said that's a route horse. but
But
you guys
I
know
think
more than me.
I think a lot of us get fooled by the fact they're running against the same horses out there. So the San Vicente it's a sprint race that he's going to run by the competition, which isn't a whole lot in my opinion, easily down the backside, and then he has a free roll to the wire. Journalism can run a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to find out a lot tomorrow. And here's the funny thing about journalism. He broke well enough in the Los Al Derby to go to the lead, but they chose to rate him and teach him, which was the right thing to do, I believe. Tomorrow, he's drawn inside Barnes. If I were riding him and he outbroke Barnes by a neck, I'd just go right to the lead because I know that in the Santa Anita Derby, I can take him back on that time.
So one more thing to say about this race. It all has to do right now with the dynamic of Southern California racing and how few 3-year-olds we've seen that aren't trained by Bob Baffert being entered in some of these prep races. You've got Citizen Bull, who is many people's number one 3-year-old right now on their Derby list, who has never proven that he can win a big race rated off the pace. He's making the lead every time he runs. We still
very comfortably,
slow paces. We still don't know what he can do if he doesn't get that kind of a setup. You've got Mataquette Road, who goes to Arkansas and who blasts off early and who runs a heck of a race, finishing second to Coal Battle in the Rebel. You've got Barnes, who very possibly in the San Felipe tomorrow could get an easy early lead based on what they do with journalism. So you got all these horses that they have all this potential. You've got Bob Baffert. They're so talented, but there's so many question marks that are still out there about these horses, potentially after the San Felipe as well.
It's really interesting to see how the sort of team scrimmage aspect of this is going to play out. They likely won't all be in the gate. They will not be in the gate together, or any real major combination of them, you would think, until the first Saturday in May. But, one thing that I hadn't thought of until this conversation is how the potential team tactics that could work against Rodriguez in this race could benefit him long term. Sounds like you two both think he could be a real player, and maybe don't get too negative if he runs a well-beaten third in this spot, if he settles better and finishes his race a little bit.
Yeah, he's a real light-made horse. He's almost looks like a filly. He's longer and leaner. To me, he had every chance in the world last time in the Lewis to make a run. For some reason, a horse came up outside of him. He sucked back and then went around quickly, which probably wasn't the right thing to do as a rider. But he still went on to finish okay. To me, if he's going to show me that he can finish, he's going to ease back early, be third early, and make a sustained 3/8 of a mile run. That's just my opinion.
And keep this in mind historically. Fountain of Youth, San Felipe, more horses out of those races have gone on to win the Kentucky Derby who lost in the San Felipe and the Fountain of Youth than who actually won those two races. So if you see Barnes making an easy early lead and he goes wire to wire and he wins by a length and a quarter and journalism is charging at him at the end, journalism might be the horse going forward instead of Barnes.
I'm glad you mentioned journalism again, because I feel like I gave him short shrift. I feel like we've covered the Bafferts thoroughly, but I'll ask it this way. What is the ceiling for journalism in both of your minds? Randy, we'll start with you.
Oh, we haven't seen enough of him yet, which is the case of most of these 3-year-olds out there, to really be confident in what his ceiling is. But what we've seen so far, I think he's got a pretty high ceiling.
And I don't know that we're going to learn a whole lot tomorrow. I mean, if he outbreaks the field and he goes to the lead and he wins, I don't know that we've learned a lot other than he's probably better than Barnes. If he breaks and decides to ease back and he gets caught in a pocket and really doesn't have a fair trip, I don't know that we learn a lot either. So because of his post position and the intent not to really want to go to the lead early with him, I think by the connections, I think he'll run well, but I don't know that we learn a whole lot.
That's a fair point as well. I didn't prep you guys for this question, but of the other 3-year-olds out there in this crop at large who are not running this weekend, do either of you have one you might want to put forward as one for the viewers to keep their eye on going forward?
Well, in my top 5, and by the way, it was harder for me to make my top 5 this week than any other week leading up to this because you've had East Avenue that disappointed. I don't know yet about Barnes, although I put him number 1. I have Barnes number 1. I've got Burnham Square in there. I've got Sovereignty in there. I've got Baeza in there, another California horse. That's, I guess, one that I would point out if he runs in the Santa Anita Derby. and wins or runs second, closing second, he would be in my top 5 going to Kentucky.
I guess I would have to, and I wouldn't put an exclamation point after this, Pete, would be Citizen Bull. Jerry doesn't have him in his top 5, and I totally understand why. I didn't have him in the last top 5 that I did.
Because we don't think he can go a mile and a quarter. He will surely be challenged in the Kentucky Derby and have to run faster early than he ever has before.
Yeah, and have to settle behind horses, and he's never shown it before.
He might win the Santa Anita Derby and still not be in my top 5.
But he might just be the best 3-year-old out there.
That's what the racing form says right now in terms of his accomplishments. You've got a 2-year-old champion, imperious in victory in his lone start. But I agree, he's been the beneficiary, in my view, of some good luck with other horses not breaking. See East Avenue, and maybe some team tactics helping him along in his races. Baeza, though, is an interesting one that might not be on a lot of people's radar. This is a John Sheriff's runner, just won the maiden last out, but we know Sheriff's somebody. Talk about bringing him along slowly. He makes the Nafsker school, the Mott school, Ian Wilkes look like speed demons in the way they bring horses along. So for Baeza to announce his talent the way he did, he could be a little bit interesting going forward. If you had the chance to see him in person physically, Jerry, I'm curious if your case comes from him as looking at him physically as an individual, or more just off the tape and the form.
Same as you, off the form, just watching him break his maiden. And it's a big mountain for him to climb. He's only going to have one more race before the Kentucky Derby, and that's going to be the Santa Anita Derby. So, although I don't think he will be taken back by dirt and crowds and other horses, because he's had a little bit of experience already. There's no substitute for racing, and I think so many people are getting so fewer preps going into the Kentucky Derby. First of all, it's hard to determine how good they are, and it's second, a lot of new things thrown at them once they get there.
And by the way, Baeza is named after the jockey that Jerry used to ride with, and not the guy that's in New York right now.
That you're giving me all these tempting rabbit holes to go down, but I'm not going to take the bait. I will give you a chance to tell folks where they can watch you on NBC this weekend, though. I'm sure Jerry knows.
It's CNBC from 5 to 7 Eastern time.
As far as I know, the show starts when Jerry gets up and walks to the set, Pete. I think I've said that before.
Oh, you want to hear something funny? Originally, we were told we're going to do races from Gulfstream 10, 11, and 12. Yeah. And then 3 from Santa Anita.
So the very one, the Honey Fox.
No, the very one, the Gulfstream Park Mile.
Gulfstream Park Mile.
And then the Honey Fox.
And then the Fountain of Youth.
And then, so we were told after a day and a half and about 8 hours of preparation.
Or more.
That, we're not doing the very one or the Gulfstream Park Mile. And we're adding on the Macromedia at the end. So we've been upside down this week.
I had every chart of every race ever run, the Holy Bull and the Gulfstream Park Mile, or the very one. Gulfstream Park Mile. We had all this work. We talked to trainers about their horses in the race, everything. But anyway,
you can tell who the producer of the pair is, can't you, people? And my producer note is: shouldn't it be the very one?
It should be, yeah, and it should be the Jeff Ruby Stakes.
Exactly. I wasn't planning this question either, so punt it right back to me and out of the stadium if you want. But if you had a thought on one of those races that you looked at that you're not doing on TV, if you had a horse you wanted to throw out, this would be a good time, but zero obligation.
Well, I mean, the most interesting horse in those 2 races is Mindframe, making his first start back since the Belmont last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he's got the one post, not advantageous, going a mile. But he's the horse that I really look forward to seeing at Gulfstream Park before the 3 that we do.
And we don't know if we'll even have time to mention this because it's going to be fast and furious on the telecast, but Team Clement is very high on Ozara at a pretty big price in the Honey Fox.
The very nice.
Is it the very one?
Is it the Honey? No, it's the Honey Fox.
It's the Honey Fox,
See?
I think.
It's confusing already, Pete.
Yeah.
Great stuff, guys. Really appreciate you taking so much time. Be very interesting to see if Mindframe can get his mind right. Unlimited talent seemingly there. For Jerry and Randy, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.